the next few years, the rest of the ceiling will collapse. And one thing that would happen is the plaster dust itself catches dirt, catches seeds. It's not a nutrient itself that would nurture plant life, but it could be the beginning.
It may start small, but green life grows into a powerful menace. Even a once mighty fort in Texas can't withstand this advancing army. After people. Detroit. The town once ruled by the big three automakers crumbles. A place that once cranked out 15 million new cars every year now sees those same cars decaying on its streets. None of them have inflated tires anymore. But the rubber and synthetics will last for hundreds of years. Within another 25 years, the tough Detroit climate will reduce this car to a skeleton. 1,500 miles away in San Antonio, repeated rains have spawned cycles of flooding along the Riverwalk. Waterlogged foundations leave the buildings tilting at odd angles as silt and sand inundate the area.
I call it death by inches. It happens slowly, it happens insidiously. The river itself, although not flowing very fast, would flood over and over again, bringing a lot of silt, a lot of sand to basically cover part of that area. The buildings sink into it, settle, but they sink unevenly.
Eventually, the lean is too much for one of the buildings. It falls into the river it once overlooked. Meanwhile, the Alamo facade stares back untouched from its elevated perch on the city's street level. But an enemy is attacking the compound from within. In the time of humans, live oaks already dominated the Alamo's courtyard.
We have many oak trees, and those oak trees tend to grow very large. The limbs will extend outward, and the weight of the limbs causes them to reach down to the earth where they support themselves.
Without people to redirect the massive limbs, the trees will begin to demolish the Alamo walls.
The limb behind me is one of those that's been held up by an iron post to keep it off of the ground. Without people to constantly cut the limbs back, that limb would continue to grow, and at some point, it would crush the wall. Those oak trees would drop acorns as well, and wildlife would come over here, and they would bring seeds.
Over 200 years after the Alamo fell to an invading Mexican army, an army of trees conquers it again. The Alamo doesn't stand a chance. Years after people. When it opened as a gateway to Ontario, Canada in 1929, Detroit's 1,850-foot-long Ambassador Bridge stood as the longest suspension bridge in the world. In the time of humans, this was the busiest border crossing between the U.S. and Canada, carrying 1/4 of the merchandise, including most of the auto parts traded between the two countries. But as the vertical suspension cables give way, nothing will ever cross this bridge again.
Those vertical suspension cables are exposed to the wind, exposed to the weather, and they vibrate quite a bit in the wind. So they're a major wear area and a major maintenance problem for any keeper of any suspension bridge.
But in a life after people, there is no one to repair the frays in the vertical cables.
The weak spots are basically down at the bottom of the cable, where the cables actually tie into the deck.
The vertical cables lay over one of two horizontal white lines known as catenary cables. 37 steel strands, each about a foot in diameter, interweave to form just one of the catenary cables.
As multiple cables break, it actually changes the shape of the white catenary cable that holds the whole thing up, because it's no longer taking an even amount of weight at each interval.
Another vertical cable snaps, and a segment of the deck crashes into the river. A 150-foot gap now gashes through the road to Canada. Within seconds, the other sections fall. In the century to come, the wheels of progress continue to roll backwards as the seat of an automotive monarchy disintegrates. Monarchy disintegrates. 150 years after people. In Detroit, just upstream from the Ambassador Bridge, the central tower of the Renaissance Center still stands taller than any other building. Broken windows have left the structure unable to retain any heat from the sun.
There's a lot of rubble on them. During the winter, a fair amount of ice loading would build up because the sun would not directly warm the building, because most of the glass would be gone.
One of the upper floors finally loses its grip, and the rest of the central tower collapses, bringing down one of the adjoining buildings as it falls. Years after people. On the skeleton of the Ambassador Bridge, the white horizontal catenary cable that once held up the span is now ironically helping to topple its remains.
That big cable is anchored on either side, on either shore. And when the deck is no longer there, the tension will be uneven. The big vertical towers would bend toward the land side. The tops would spread apart, and that would put quite a bit of strain on those towers.
The towers finally yield, and the last vestiges of a great transportation link disappear. In San Antonio, the river has swallowed the city.
The whole downtown San Antonio area basically has little hills and little remnants of buildings.
The Alamo is still standing, but just barely. Like the great stone temples of Cambodia's Angkor Wat, years of uncontrolled tree growth have the structure in a death grip. There is no one to remember the Alamo, but more importantly, no one to repair it. As the Alamo falls, another Texas icon soldiers on. After breaking out into the wild, longhorn cattle are finding that history is just repeating itself. In the 1800s, they escaped from the confines of their Spanish missionary masters.
These animals evolved into an animal that could survive on its own. They grew very long in leg, very strong hooves, so they could travel long distances for water and forage.
In this earlier life without people, longhorns acquired a genetic diversity that serves them very well now.
We don't need veterinarians even today with our cattle. They're extremely disease resistant. It's what makes a longhorn adaptable without humans.
Many dairy and beef cattle died out quickly in a life after people because they struggled to give birth without human assistance. Longhorns don't have that problem.
The calves would hit the ground and start running immediately. So as far as an animal that can survive without humans today, the Texas Longhorn definitely can, because they've already proven they can do it.
Now, 2 centuries into a life after people, they number in the tens of millions, just as they did in the 1800s.